Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So we're continuing on with the series that supports us to understand and return to our fundamental truths as we explore the Four Noble Truths. So last week we discussed sources of identity and the ways in which the sources of identity are connected to experiences of stress when any aspect of those are threatened. And so here we're going to look at the way sources of identity end up being a cause of our stress. So when we have a body experience of well-being and that changes, then the inevitable experience of stress is dependent upon the assumption that our body is not supposed to change. When we're having pleasant feelings and they shift, and there's that sense of disappointment or sometimes heartbreak, the fundamental underlying condition or cause for that heartbreak is the presumption that feelings should not change. When we experience ourselves in a female body or in a male body, or when we notice or sense that our gender is changing, when the color of our skin activates a feeling in our mind or gets reactions from other people, when the size of our body, when the shape of our body is activating feelings of pleasant or unpleasant, they're not what they like, we would like them to be different, then in each of these situations there's stress. Likewise, when we are in conversation with people who do not share the same views that we have, one of the things that we can do is we can feel and notice the differences, and the differences can highlight or accentuate a sense of stress. When the values that we have are not shared by the people who are in power, we can experience that as intensely stressful. When the groups that we're part of somehow threaten our identity, our beliefs, our roles, in all of these ways, this can be a source of stress. When the beliefs that we have are not supported with the reality that we are in, there's a cognitive dissonance, and that is all stressful. When the roles that we are immersed in and value are not supported, and in each of these situations there's stress. So going back to the aggregates of body, feeling, perception, formations, views, values, groups, beliefs, and roles, and consciousness, we can see that in each of these areas there are sources of identity, and when each of these identities is threatened, then this can be a cause of stress. But when we look underneath all of this, when we notice what is the background underneath all of this, we can see a pattern. So how many of us have experienced some kind of illness, whether it's just waking up in the morning and feeling more arthritic because of the water patterns, or just getting older, or feeling stiff, the neck muscles are not working very well, or navigating more serious illness, things that are potentially life-threatening, or certainly disabling, like broken limbs, where we're not able to function in the way that we are used to. There's different stresses that are associated with that. One stress is just the stress that comes with the physical pain of it. Another stress that comes with it is the stress that comes with the things that have shifted. So when we've got a broken limb and we can't open up jars, I heard there are people sometimes who have 2 broken arms, and it makes something as simple as pulling up your pants and zipping your zipper almost impossible. So the very simple things like going potty and getting dressed become a phenomenal challenge. So it interrupts our ability to function, the roles that we have, the activities that we can do, the identity that we have sometimes of being self-sufficient. And so underneath this change, really one of the significant sources of stress in these circumstances is the desire for things to be different than the way they are. So if we wake up in the morning and we've got a cold and our head is all foggy, we can't think very well. So our normal capacity to do the stuff that we do might need to be curtailed. We might need to call and change our appointments. We might need to not be on the computer so much that day. We might need to reschedule times where we're meeting with people. Because if we show up when we've got a cold, then not only are we not so effective, but it's possible that we're going to give our cold to the other person or to the group. And so the stress is not in the physical sensation of the cold, but of not wanting to shift all of these things that we had set up. So as we manage things on a more simple level, just the stress of being with physical discomfort, the stress of change, then what we can come to is the underlying desire for things to be different than the way that they are. And when we get that in some of these personal spheres, that the deep-seated stress is related to the desire for things to be different from the way they are, we can understand how that desire sets up a craving, and that craving has us thinking, and that thinking has us imagining and our mind spinning about how we can get out of the circumstance and do what we want, or fix it, or solve it, or game it. But underneath all of that thinking and all of that busyness, really underneath all of it, is the simple desire for things to be different than the way that they are. So, when we take all of the ways that we can be identified through our body, our feelings, our perception of gender, color, size, and shape, through the formations and our associations with all of that shapes our views, our values, our roles, the groups that we are a part of, our beliefs. What we can see, where it all boils down to, is the sense or the reality that there's a deep-seated hunger for things to be different than the way that they are, as the source, the fundamental source of the stress that we are navigating. So the challenge with this is that it looks at stress and it points to the inside job that is our personal responsibility of how we are relating to what is arising as a significant component of the stress that we are navigating. And while that is challenging with some of the things that we are feeling stressed about, it's also a huge support. Because when the source of the stress is the way we are relating to experience, then right there is the possibility for us to shift the way that we are relating to experience and release the stress. So you have all probably heard the bear story, but I'm going to say it again and use it as an example to show how this works. So I had heard about the Dhamma when I was 17 years old, and from that time on had a vision of going on a pilgrimage to Asia. And with life being what it is and circumstance being what it is, and going to college and accruing student loans and needing to work them off, and having a job and a boyfriend and everything that I was in the middle of, it took 10 years before that aspiration, or 9 years before that aspiration to go on pilgrimage I was able to realize it. And so I was in Nepal, and it was the first time that I was away from family and friends, and I was traveling on my own. And the longer that I was away, the more that I felt a sense of disorientation and dislocation. And for me, even since I was a young girl, nature has been a source of solace and a place where I've been able to regroup and reorient and feel more sense of clarity about a way forward. So the longer I was in Nepal, the more I had a sense of being disoriented. And so I was going to go to Dharamsala and visit the place of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, perhaps even attend a gathering that he was presiding over. But when I got to India, in the McLeod Ganj, which is where His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives, I was just really hungering to be out in the wilderness. And so I asked a friend, somebody that I'd met in the guest house, who seemed to be harmless enough, if he would accompany me on a journey up into the mountains. And so his name was Brian, and after a day or two, we packed our packs and we set up for Triand, which is a saddle at 10,000 feet above McLeod Ganj. And we left our big packs, and the next morning we set out on a hike. And for me, one of the sources of real pleasure was being off path, just being in nature and watching what happens, seeing what I see. It's like a kind of regulation that would happen to me when I couldn't locate myself on a map. So we were off the path, and we'd found a creek, and we were trying to find our way back up to where we'd left our packs, and we were on the inside of a very steep mountain. And Brian and I had known each other, I don't know, a day and a half or two, and we're just getting to know some of the specifics of each other's capacities and skills. And he walked in front of this rock and clambered up on top of it and was checking out with me if I was able to climb up, which was simple, it was not a big deal. So I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And I was standing about 6 feet in front of this rock, and I was wearing a dress and a hat and my backpack and sunglasses. And with my sunglasses, I was noticing that there was a cave in this rock. And so I was looking in the cave, but I couldn't see anything because I had sunglasses on. And Brian was on top of the rock, and I said, Brian, did you notice that there was a cave here? And from that rock came an incredible noise, a noise that I will never forget. And coming running towards me was a very large black bear. And when the bear's face was this far away from my face, about 1.5 feet, many things happened all at once. I went for refuge, I screamed, I jumped back, I screamed again, I passed out from fear. So the first moment of consciousness when I woke up was this incredible sense of fear. When maybe not too surprising, because the bear had straddled me and was chewing me on my head. So I could feel the presence of the bear, the pressure against the length of my back, the belly of the bear pressed against the length of my back, and I could feel the pressure of the teeth of the bear in my neck and in my head. And so that first moment of consciousness was really boundless fear, infinite fear. There was no end to it, there was no edge to it, there was no perspective around it, it was just infinite. But meditation practice had preceded those 9 years before I had come to this place where I was on pilgrimage. And every time we were in the meditation, we had an opportunity to watch what was arising in the mind and our relationship with it. Now, it was true that a lot of those years I spent at the Angela Center, which is just on the edge of Santa Rosa, in a retreat center with roofs and doors and bells and food. It wasn't in the wilderness of India, and there wasn't bears that came into the meditation hall. At least there weren't physical bears that came into the meditation hall. But the reality of our own internal experience is that we can experience bears all the time. And the value of meditation is that when we learn to understand how to work with the internal bears of our own internal fears, the anxieties that we experience, the overwhelm that we experience, the system shutting down, then in that experience we can work with not just the object of what we're experiencing, but how we're relating to it. So through a combination of who knows what, meditation experience, mindfulness, some miracles, blessings of the divas, who knows what, there was the capacity to know the fear as fear. And then there was the thought, well, really there's no point in being afraid of it because I'm going to die. So there was no hope. I was not hanging on to a what-if scenario of how I was going to live happily ever after. It was, this is what is happening. A bear is eating you. And in that moment, because of the circumstances, the mind just released. It let go. Even while the bear was still chewing on my head. And still pressed, the belly of the bear was still pressed against the whole of the length of my back. And in that moment, the mind released fear and opened up to clarity, to equanimity, to peace, to joy, to curiosity, wondering how the dissolution of my body was going to be, what it was going to feel like to die. So in that instance, in that moment, there was peace. Because in the surrender, I had let go of desiring it to be different than the way that it was. I had let go of a hope that I might live. I had let go of roles, of beliefs. I had let go of views, of values. I had let go of groups. I had let go of everything. And all there was the knowing, the clarity of the mind and the body, the joy of seeing clearly, the curiosity of wondering how it was all going to dissolve. That's all there was. So the Buddha's teaching comes back to this very fundamental place that teaches us a kind of surrender and transcendence that is possible even when we are in extreme circumstances. And it's because of this. The Buddha speaks about the mind as the forerunner of all things. It's the thing that we can rely on. We don't always have choice about what we're experiencing. Whether our limb is broken, whether our knees ache, whether our arthritis is flaring up, whether we've got a cold, or we or some of our loved ones are navigating a much more serious illness. We don't have control. But we do have choice in the way that we relate to it. We do have choice in what we do and where we focus our attention. And that is an enormous possibility for freedom. So what I'd like to invite you to do, either in pairs or as a group, is to consider the times where the sources of your identity think of an instance where something related to your body, your feelings, your gender, your color, your size, your shape, your views, your values, your groups, your beliefs, your roles. Allowed you to feel a deep-seated desire that it was otherwise. Know what that desire for things to be otherwise, what that feels like. How did you experience it? So what I'd like you to do is, without getting lost in the content of the story, just give a few words to convey who, what, where, and when. Who, what, where, and when. And when you have shared just a couple words on each, and talk about the experience of desiring things to be otherwise. How did you feel it? Where did you feel it? And allow that to be the basis of your conversation and discussion together. Thank you.